Hello friends, and welcome to my 2025 challenge, where each month I have a blind date with a book and a blind date with a bake. And this month, the month of March, was superb. Two amazing things that I can't wait to talk about. But before we get started, let's go ahead and have a rewind so you know exactly what we'll be talking about today. Before we open the book, let's go ahead and figure out what we're baking. So we're going to open here. Ooh, biscotti al coco facilia. Easy coconut cookies. All right, book. So, give you the first look. Oh, I had it turned around. Bandit Queens. Gita is believed to have killed her vanished husband, a rumor she hasn't bothered trying to correct. Okay, that's all I'm gonna read. So as you saw, we're gonna be talking about The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff, and I went ahead and made these coconut cookies, or macarons, by Melissa Fortes, and these were both fantastic. First of all I can smell is coconut right now, and it smells so good. And this book was just mind-blowing. I'm still thinking about it, and I can't wait to talk more about it. But before we get started, let's go have a little baking montage of these beautiful cookies while I tell you what this book's about, or at least read the little synopsis on the back. Gita is believed to have killed her vanished husband, a rumor she hasn't bothered trying to correct, because a reputation like that can keep a single woman safe in rural India. But when she's approached for help in ridding another wife of her abusive drunk of a husband, her reluctant agreement sets in motion a chain of events that will change the lives of all the women in the village. A darkly irreverent and fresh take on feminist revenge thriller, which acknowledges the unfortunate status quo for women everywhere and shows us that female connection and friendship are what carry us through the darkness and absurdity of life. So just by that synopsis, you can imagine I kind of approached this book with I don't know where I'm going, but I'm excited for the ride. But before we get too far into this video, I just want to remind you how I have this video set up so you know exactly what to expect. First, we're going to go ahead and taste these cookies because I want to tell you how amazing they are and encourage you to go make them yourself. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about this book without any spoilers. So we're going to have a little non-spoiler section, so any of you who want to read this book and just kind of want a better idea of what to expect, this is the time. And then afterwards, I'm going to go into all spoilers, all of my thoughts, all of my feelings. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about everything. So if you have read the book, then we can kind of gush about it at the end. I'm really excited about it. I hope you're excited about it. And then at the very, very end of this, I'll be picking a new book for April, because it's going to be April where I read my next book. And we'll be picking up another bake and randomly choosing that. So stay tuned to the very end because that's also really fun, and we then get to figure out what we'll be reading together in the month of April. So let's go ahead and try these cookies first because I want to tell you how amazing they are. I'm not gonna lie, I've already eaten a bunch of them and they're absolutely perfect size. You can actually make them smaller, which I think I should have done, so they were like 1-bite cookies, but for the most part I think they're just fantastic the way they are. I made 2 different kind of shapes, so I made these like ice cream sherbet shapes, but I also did like drop cookies because I wanted to see how they would bake, and both ways are perfectly fine. The drop cookies are a little bit easier because you just kind of have to drop some batter onto the baking sheet and then they bake. These are a little bit prettier and more uniform, and all of them are about the same size, but honestly you can go either way. They're going to be fantastic both ways. So I honestly think these are fantastic for like a nice little brunch or a nice snack to take to the office. It's egg white, coconut, and sugar. That's all it is. You can add a little bit of vanilla extract if you want to add a vanilla flavor, a little bit of salt if they're too sweet, but honestly, they're so beautiful. Beautiful white coconut on the inside. And I can eat these all day. They're so tasty, but I can't because we have books to talk about. But I highly recommend it. I think they're wonderful. This one was super easy to follow. That's one of the reasons I love Melissa Fortes' baking book. All of her recipes have been great to follow, super easy, and everything's been delightful and delicious, at least the things that we've baked so far, and I'm really excited to kind of see what we continue to bake throughout the year. But these were so easy. I did them in an afternoon, really quick. The egg yolk, you don't end up using the egg yolk, so I highly recommend like making a custard, maybe like a vanilla custard or a lemon custard for anything you need a custard for, but really super yummy and very, very fun to make. Sorry, one thing. I did try piping them with my piping tools, like a little piping set, but it just didn't work. It didn't work. So I recommend just doing like the drop cookie if you don't mind like the funny shapes. I think the funny shapes are kind of great because you get different sizes, different shapes. They end up baking about the same temperature. Some of them are going to have a little bit darker spots, but it's delicious all around. Using the piping tool, I just had a really hard time getting my dough to kind of flow through the piping tip just because I think my coconut was very dense, but that was my problem. I think it would work if you want to make them more uniform and also about the same size, but this worked also really well. That's why I wanted to try the sherbet spoon trick to see if that would also keep them really uniform, which it did. So you can kind of go either way. If you want to have really uniform, normal, same size cookies, the spoon trick really worked, or you can try doing the piping tip like I tried and failed at, or you can just have fun and have little drop cookies like this. That's kind of the one thing I ran into, but that was a me problem, not the baking problem or the recipe problem. All right. Let me eat the last bite, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into non-spoilers of The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. So for the first section, we're not going to talk about any spoilers, but I kind of just want to talk about my feelings, my thoughts, if I recommend this book, and why I think you should read it, or maybe why you may not like it. This is just a free-flowing talk, so hopefully I can kind of help you decide if this is a book you want to pick up. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fascinating. Parini Shroff this is her debut novel. She is an attorney in the US, and this is actually on the Women's Prize for Fiction for 2023, which I thought was really, really fascinating. And I'm not surprised because of how well it was written. I was actually quite shocked that it was a debut novel with how well it was written and how the flow was kind of created and the story itself. This is not a story I have read before. I thought it was quite shocking and exciting because I don't know much about the Indian culture. I was really excited to kind of get some aspects that I haven't heard about or learn about some aspects that I haven't really seen. I know this is a fiction novel, so we're not going to get a lot of truth of everything, but it is satirical. It does play on ideas that are part of reality, and I think that was really, really awesome from Parini Shroff because we also are getting kind of a look behind the curtain of, at least for me, a culture that I don't know very much of. I'm not saying everything in here is fact of Indian culture. Unfortunately, when we're talking about physical harm on, I'm trying to be careful with certain words I say so YouTube doesn't flag me, but physical harm on other beings or drinking or addictions or anything like that, I think we also have to really be careful about how we talk about it because it's not just part of Indian culture, it's part of all over the world. But it was really kind of fascinating getting a different perspective and seeing it through our main character Geeta's life and seeing how it affects also her friend's life. So I think Parini Shroff did a really fantastic job. I thought this was really fascinating. I love the fact that I was able to get a bit like a look behind the curtain in rural India. I think India is really fascinating. I can't wait to visit someday, but this was also a really interesting way to kind of talk about something that is also a hard topic. We have a lot of dark humor. I caught myself laughing in this book, which was really weird because we're talking about some really dark situations, but Parini Shroff did a great job. I think she had this balance of humor and dark humor, but also reality and the fear of having a person in your life that's violent and what we do in those situations or what we can do in those situations. I don't condone harming somebody else, but Parini Shroff did a really great job of including this in a novel with also having that dark humor kind of playing around with it. So that's a general thought. What you've already learned from the back of the book, the synopsis, is we follow a woman named Geeta, and she lives in a very, very small village in India where she is assumed of killing her husband, and she has told us, the readers, that, hey, this has not happened. Their narrator has told us as the readers, hey, she did not do this. There is one sentence I really appreciate, and it's the first sentence of the second chapter. And it says, while Gita regarded herself as a self-made woman, she was not, in fact, a self-made widow. And I thought that sentence was so just solid that we kind of get a really good aspect and a really good overview of who Gita is just in that sentence. We learn that Gita is actually in a small loan group, which it's like a micro loan group. I didn't know anything about micro loans before reading this, so it was really fascinating. But the idea is that a bunch of women, or a group of women, get together and they pull out a loan for their businesses, and each of them have a separate business. They're not in a business together. And they pay back the loan, but they are in a group together to kind of reinforce that that loan is being paid back. It's how it's set up. I can't go in more information because I'm not a loan expert. I'm also not a micro loan expert. I'm not an expert on Indian loans, but that's the idea behind it. And so she's in a loan group, and she gets, and she started a little business after her husband left or vanished, of doing jewelry. So she makes jewelry for weddings or celebrations or events, and she does this at her home, and she sells it to the locals or other people, which, as somebody who's being accused of murder, she's not doing too bad. She can pay her loans, she can keep her business going. It's looking good. And she keeps to herself. So she doesn't really interact. She has the loan group. She's required to be with them, but she's not friends with anybody. She's just by herself 99.9% of the time. Until a woman approaches her, and this is also in the synopsis, so I'm not spoiling you, but a woman approaches her, somebody from her loan group, and says, hey, I have an abusive husband. Can you please help me get rid of him like you got rid of your husband? And instead of being like, no, we end up actually seeing that Gita is also angry with the situation. So she's frustrated, and she doesn't like that the women that she knows have to deal with things like this. But we end up having another reason of why she decides to help, and I think that reason makes more sense. So it's not just her opinion of, hey, this is bad, because she also lived through it, but it's, hey, this is bad and this is how it's affecting me. And I think that was something we needed, because we didn't want to just be like, oh, people have ignored her and didn't like her. It was, oh, people ignored her and didn't like her, and this is a reason that's benefiting her. And so I thought that was really well done. It gives us our reason for our character to be enjoying the situation. And it's just mind-blowing how it unfolds, how everything ends up happening. I was shocked every turn. I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. I think, like I said, Parini Shroff did a great job of adding new details, because I thought to myself, okay, this happened at the very beginning of the book. How are we going to have the rest of this filled up? And there was new pieces coming in without taking the story too far off. I think it was really fascinating on how we learned a little bit more about different situations and negative situations, how we learned about the fear women have in these small villages, and how they have to kind of not get over it, but how they just have to live with it. It wasn't even like a, hey, this is what we can do as a community to better it. It was, hey, this is just kind of normal, and normalizing that kind of behavior is never good. We never want to normalize abuse or addiction or anything, but the way Parini Shroff kind of played with these ideas of what was happening and how it affected the village and how it affected the women in the village was really well done. And then we also see actually healthy relationships in this as well. So it's not just a bunch of negative stuff. It's not just a bunch of men are bad. We also see healthy relationships and positive aspects of relationships. And we also see healthy relationships between husbands and wives. So it's not, hey, all men are bad, because we're also looking at women and we're also seeing it, hey, maybe not all women are good either. I mean, we got women trying to murder their husbands in this book, so it's a bit, there's a lot of gray. No. But so this is just a really fascinating novel. I think we play with a lot of cultural ideas. I think you have to go in this book understanding that there is a lot of satirical stuff going on. For example, I did unfortunately read some comments on like Goodreads and Google where people were like, oh, based on this book, my opinion of Indian culture went down. And you have to remind yourself, hey, this is just a satirical view on what's happening. When we read The Handmaid's Tale or when we read Kurt Vonnegut, we don't just say, hey, that's the truth and that's what's actually really happening. It's showing negative aspects of situations and blowing it up so that way we as the outsiders are seeing a new perspective or going in as a new view. Unfortunately, we have abusive and addiction all over the world. It's not just in India, it's also in the US, it's also in Germany, it's also everywhere. So we need to remind ourselves that yes, this is based in India, but this is not factual of everything in India. And it's not, there are some things that are changing in India, of course. Like we still see a lot of the fact that women are seen as lower, but we see that in also different cultures. So it's not just India. So we have to remind ourselves that, hey, this is a really kind of eye-opening situation where we get a little peek behind the curtain of what's happening, but it's not everywhere and it's not the whole culture. It's just little pieces. And if we want to be supportive, the way to be supportive is support the women in India who are trying to be more independent and support the women who are in abusive relationships or men who are in abusive relationships. Not just saying, hey, we think more negatively of it, but hey, what can we do to help? And I think that's more important. So you're looking at the culture and seeing things that, hey, maybe the culture doesn't support this idea either, and we want to grow and become more. And that's when we can be like, hey, let's help them grow and become more. Also in the US, let's help them grow and become more. But also in Germany, we see it as well. It's not just India. And I really, really want to push back on that because this is a satirical view. It is not the truth. That's why it's a novel. That's why it's fiction. And that's why it plays on the ideas of, hey, these are some truthful things in the world, like the Bandit Queen. The Bandit Queen is a real person. And I thought that was really cool. She was a real woman. She was somebody who fought back on abusers and she went through some things. There's actually a documentary on her. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm really curious about it now since I found out she was a true woman. Her real name was Poolan Devi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I looked it up to make sure I tried to, but the Bandit Queen is a real woman, and we end up learning that Gita almost worships her. She sees herself as somebody like the Bandit Queen, and we end up learning a lot about the Bandit Queen's life, what happened, how she became who she was, and it was hard and terrible and so fascinating. And I am super interested in watching the documentary, and maybe you want to watch the documentary before reading the book, and then maybe you can get a different perspective. So that would be really interesting as well. But this, I just wanted to, I know I'm still pushing on that subject, but I just want to remind you that this is a really wonderful chance to kind of see a different culture, but understand that this is not completely factual and this is not exactly what's happening. And if you are interested in learning more about the culture, I'm sure there's plenty of books out there that can give you a little bit more of an insight of like what's happening in India and the positive things that could be happening in India as well. And I do know there's a lot of groups that are pushing for more independence for women and more power for women. So I'll leave it at that. That's just one thing I wanted to mention because I do think that's really important to remember, is that this is a satirical view. And just like The Handmaid's Tale and just like Kurt Vonnegut books, it's a satirical view. And this is just a great kind of rough side of it. So I'll leave it at that. But I think the characters in this novel were also very different. I think the characters were individualized and they had a purpose and they had a reason. I really liked each of the women who are in Gita's loan group. We kind of get to know them as people as individual people, which I thought was really well done, because I think a lot of time for novels, we have characters that come in and then they don't have a purpose, or they have a purpose, but the purpose is just to fill in a plot hole, or just kind of be there in the background. And that's unfortunate, but I think a lot of the characters in here brought a purpose, brought a reason, and then actually fit really well in the story. I love all the tie-ins. I felt like each of the characters, or each of the men that were the problem, we had a reason why they were a problem. Even though at times when we were thinking, hey, what's really the problem with them? Why are we concerned about them? And we end up learning from different women or different situations why these men were an issue, or maybe why other women are the issue. And so it's honestly such a fascinating novel. We play with the idea of women trying to figure out how to get rid of their husbands. They kind of look back at, there's a TV series they constantly refer to. I don't know the TV series. It's based in India, and it's a real TV series. It's like CD. Oh, I can't remember. I'll go ahead and put it in the little up here so you know the name of it. But the women constantly refer to it, and I constantly think to myself, oh, we do the same thing in the US with CSI, and we're like, oh, CSI would have done it this way, or CSI would have seen it this way, or this is how you get away with things, because CSI always, and I wonder, everybody always wonders, like, is it true? Could we? And then, of course, like, probably not. But it is just so fascinating because you actually connect with these characters, and you connect with the feelings they're having, and you hope for more, but you also are wondering, hey, are they going too far? So it's just such a well-written novel where you're rooting for characters but also questioning their morals, but then also questioning your own morals, because maybe you're rooting for them and you're wondering, what in the world, why am I thinking this way? But honestly, I highly recommend it. I really liked it. I thought this was such a fun read, and I'm so curious as to reading other novels from Indian authors and kind of getting to know the Indian culture a little bit more. I had another novel recommended to me recently. I think it's called 400 Days. It's a mystery novel. I'm not sure who the author is. I'll put it up here so you can see it, but that one book was just recommended to me recently, and I'm thinking about picking that one up too, because hey, it's fun to pick up novels from other cultures, other authors, and it's really nice to get branched out a little bit. So those are all of my non-spoiler thoughts. I know I didn't give you very much, but I really don't want to say too much, because I think the joy of this book is kind of going in there blind and picking it up as you're going and being shocked with every turn, or being not shocked, or wondering what's going to happen, what's going to be next, and wondering how these relationships and this powerful, not powerful women group will actually move forward. It's just well written, it carries itself through, and I really enjoyed it, so I hope you enjoy it as well. But if you don't want to be part of the spoilers, I highly recommend going to the chapters below, because if you want to see what book I'm going to be reading next, you're going to want to jump to the end of the chapter. I can't really remember what side I'm supposed to be on, but you're going to want to go to the last part of this video, where we're going to be opening our next book for our next video, our next book for our next month, so April's book, and then also what bake we're going to be baking. So make sure you don't click off, make sure you just jump to the end so you can see what we're going to be doing. And thank you so much for joining me if you're going to be clicking off. It's great to always have you back. I know these are kind of very focused videos, but it's still a lot of fun for me, and I love the fact that I can talk about some of these books that maybe aren't as well known. I know I talked about Ocean Vuong's On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous in the month of February, but I haven't actually heard very much of the Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff, so I'm really happy I was able to talk about this and kind of let you guys know more about it, encourage you to read it. If you read it and you just want to tell me if you liked it, I would love to know. If you didn't like it, I would love to know why not. I love the fact that this is one of the reasons why I love talking about books and sharing opinions about different forms of art, because it is based on your opinion. Sometimes when I recommend you a book, you're going to hate it or you're going to love it, and I love to know what you got from it. So if you didn't like it, let me know and why. If you did like it, let me know and why. So If you don't want to know spoilers, I would highly recommend clicking to the next chapter below. And I just want to say thank you for joining me. And if you're here for spoilers, we're going to talk about spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. If you've read this book, you know that it is just full of weirdness and excitement and funkiness and just shock. I really loved seeing how Gita's relationship changed with the women. Like Freya, I believe is her name. She's the first woman that Gita helps. She plays slightly dumb throughout the first part of the novel. Freya, I believe. Farah? F-A-R-A-H. So sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm going to do Farah, I believe. Farah. So Farah is the first one to approach Gita to be like, hey, I need your help. And we understand why Farah wants to get rid of her husband. She has black eyes. She's bruised all the time. She's losing money. She can't afford her loan anymore because her husband's taking her money to be able to pay for alcohol. Like, it's just a very negative relationship. But Gita says no. And I thought that was very interesting. And this is what I was talking about in this non-spoiler section, is that we have Gita say no to her because she's like, why? What's in it for me? And there's nothing in it for her. There is literally nothing in it. None of these women have supported her during this time. No one's supported her in the accusations that she didn't kill her husband. Like, everybody assumes that she did. There's rumors, there's songs, there's things. I mean, they even joke about her feeding her husband to her dog, but she ended up getting her dog like later in the story. It's just really fascinating. So we play with a lot of ideas of, when do you help somebody? And she doesn't want to help them because there's no reason to. There was no support for her, and she doesn't see it until she accidentally overhears Farah's husband talking to a barkeep, and it was like, hey, I'll go ahead and get more money from that lady that Farah works or has a loan with. Like, we're gonna keep getting money from her. I'll do it. And that's when Gita says, no, I'm not into this. She's worked so hard in the last 5 years of putting her life together that she is not gonna let this man ruin it. So we have a bunch of rumors of what happened to Gita's husband, and so she's not a mean person. I don't think she's mean-spirited, but I think after years of being alone and just in her own world, she's become secluded and a hermit and just doesn't care anymore, which I don't blame her. And so when Farah comes to her and says, hey, help me kill my husband, and she's feigning dumb, and we're trying to figure out how we're gonna do this, and they're out looking for a plastic bag. And that's when we get to meet Saloni, a former friend of Gita, and we start to get to learn more about this relationship. And I think Parini Shroff did a really good job kind of mapping out this relationship, looking at the problems of what the relationship was, what happened, how Parini saw the relationship, and then also how Gita assumed how the relationship was. And it kind of plays with this idea of there's always two sides of the story. And I really love this idea, is that from Sarini's side, Gita abandoned her pretty much. She chose her husband over her opinion, and they've been friends since childhood. And Gita just like was like, oh, never mind, your opinion doesn't matter. My husband's more important. Like, we also see the misbalance there, and this idea of women helping women, that was broken there. She chose a man's opinion, her man's world, before she chose her friends, who was a childhood friend. I think this is one of those parts where we really start to see the difference between women choosing women or women choosing men. And we really look at the feminist idea and the empowerment idea here. And Saloni feels betrayed. And she 100% she has the right to those feelings. And Gita didn't understand that until later on. And you start to kind of realize like why she didn't see it. And I think the relationship between Saloni and her are really well kind of represented in the story. But so we kind of first see Farah and Gita out trying to find a way to kill Farah's husband, and then we run into Saloni, but Saloni, like Gita doesn't want Saloni to know what's going on because Gita doesn't trust Saloni because Saloni's been spreading rumors about Gita because they're not friends anymore, right? Because Gita betrayed Saloni by choosing her husband, but now Gita's husband's been gone for 5 years, assumed to be murdered, and Saloni still doesn't want anything to do with her, which 100% understand. And so we end up kind of following the storyline of what's happening. And this is just in the very beginning of the book. And Gita and Farah end up finding a way to kill Farah's husband. Farah does it, and Farah's husband's dead. And this is where it gets really interesting. We start to get blackmail between women. And Farah starts blackmailing Gita, and Farah's like, oh, I feign dumb all the time. And there are times when you're like, is she smart? But there are other times when you're like, I don't know. So there are, I mean, she does what she's doing really well. She was able to get rid of her husband, who was a very negative force, who abused their children, and who is scum of the earth. Again, I don't condone violence. I don't condone that kind of stuff, but this is a novel and this is a form of fiction. So we're just talking about the fictional characters. So scum of the earth, and Gita's now being blackmailed by Farah. So now we don't like Farah because she's blackmailing Gita, and it's unfair to Gita because Gita was just there to help her. And now Saloni knows about it because Farah told Saloni, and Saloni's now told the other girls in the lone group. And now Gita's being told, hey, you're being more blackmailed and you need to help me get rid of this next husband. And so we end up hearing more about these other two twins, Priya and Preeti. Pia and Preeti. And these two are twins. They live together. They're married to their husbands in their house. They have children. And we've ended up finding out that Preeti is married to the man who assaulted her. And this was kind of mind-boggling to me because this is something I didn't know would be actually happening. I do know of acid attacks. I do have heard of them before. I've heard of them around the world. But this idea of this man was refused by one of the twins, Priya, and this man didn't realize that he was throwing acid in the wrong twin's face. And so she was forced to marry the attacker because the family assumed that she wasn't going to find anything better. This woman was forced to marry the man who attacked her. And this man originally wanted the other sister. How messed up is this? So we end up learning a little bit more about Preeti's relationship with her husband and this idea of him feigning love and darling and all this stuff. And Gita has been asked to get rid of this husband. And we're, as the audience, being like, hey, why? What's the problem? What's he doing? Like, yeah, he's a terrible, terrible person, but he's been trying to fix the relationship, do everything he can to make her happy, and we keep seeing this, right? Until it goes so bad. This is probably the one part of the story where it got really, really dark, and not humorous dark, like dark, dark. And this is one of those moments where I was like, oof, I don't know if I can continue reading this part. This is really heavy, but thankfully it didn't go into too much detail. And we end up learning that this Preeti's husband is actually the man who's been going out and hurting young women in the fields while they're trying to use the bathroom. And he's the reason that women are scared to go to the fields to use the restroom. And he's abusing these women and forcing them. And I can't imagine how these women feel. And he tries to do this to Gita and says, oh, you're a widow. You want this. Nobody else wants you because you're just a widow and nobody cares about you. Which you're starting to get a kind of look on how the society looks on women when they've lost their husbands. And it was just a very dark scene, and Gita ends up bopping him upside the head with a statue, and bleh. So, I mean, she had full right to the situation, and she protected herself, and I respect her for that situation. And I can't imagine being in a situation like that. But the way everything kind of folds out or falls together is really well done. I think, like I said, I think Parini did a great job kind of making sure the story fit well together and never putting in information that we didn't need. I felt like we needed this because we needed to understand that this person was a bad person. We needed to root for them, even though we question our morals when we do. So the twins end up creating a plan where they say, hey, we'll just say he was trying to, with the twin sister that he was actually in love with, and she went ahead and used self-defense in this situation. So they all figured it out and ran away, not ran away, but they all like created an alibi for the situation, and we go forward. And this is where things get a little messy, not in the sense of the writing style, but in the story where characters are starting to realize that, oh, this is not really working out. We're kind of a little messy in the situation. Things are falling apart. Are we actually going to be safe? Are we going to be in trouble? Are we going to go to prison? And we're getting this a lot from Geeta, because Geeta's actually 100% involved in both of these violent situations. So in these murders. And so we're it's a lot of like, hey, what's going to happen? Geeta's always worried. Geeta's stressed out. And we also have a lot of backstory. So we have a relationship with Geeta and this other man who she's met and knows only because he was selling alcohol to her husband. And so we have a lot of like backstory and a lot of other things happening in the background, but it all works out, which is really fascinating. But then we start looking at the relationships between Hindus and Muslims and how it's conflict and how it's not normal. But we also have this idea of why not? And I thought that was a very fascinating idea and a very interesting way to bring in this religious aspect without kind of being over the top. And we do see other women and other characters who are Hindu or Muslim. So we do have those religious aspects playing inside this novel, but without going too far, but still kind of just dipping our toe in, which I really appreciated. And so we have relationships like that in the background. We have our main character. We have another character who's like the Dom, who's like the guy who makes the alcohol that's being sold, that's not supposed to be sold because it's illegal. And so we have all these things happening, but it all works out. I thought Parini Shroff did such a great job at making sure everything fit perfectly together. And so that's one of the reasons why I really like this novel, is things just kind of went really well. And I have such a hard time talking about this book because there's so many moving pieces. We don't just have Geeta and her lone group and the getting rid of these husbands. We also have Geeta and this man who makes alcohol and this bad situation. We also have Geeta and her private relationships, and then we have Geeta and her husband. And so her husband ends up coming back and we're like, what in the world? He's blind, he needs help. Geeta starts to feel sorry for him at one point, which is this made me really, really mad. This part made me frustrated, and I questioned if this could be like over the top. And it was the part where Geeta and her, I don't actually remember her husband's name, and I'm okay with that because her husband is a scum of the earth as well. Ramesh. Okay. So we have Ramesh and Geeta, and Ramesh is back, and Geeta starts feeling sorry for him because his life is hard. He's blind now. He's not drinking anymore. He's sorry. He's begging for forgiveness. And so we're starting to see that, and Geeta's starting to fall for it. And we have Saloni, who's now just getting back into Geeta's life, and now is again saying, Geeta, He is a terrible man, and we don't understand why until we get a little flashback into before Gita and Ramesh get married. And we end up finding out that Ramesh pretty much demanded everything and anything her family could give him as a dowry. And he constantly said, no, I didn't take anything. No, I didn't take anything. I just love you the way you are. And we end up finding out that was all bull crap. All just lies. And we end up getting more and more negative information about Ramesh and more things that are just so frustrating about Ramesh. And to see this woman, Gita, who's worked so hard to get to her where she is, start forgiving this man, getting rid of her jewelry sets, or letting him sleep inside, or forgiving him. And we start seeing that, and that's where I get mad, because it's one of those moments where you're just like, Gita, don't do it. Like, you deserve so much better than this scum. And I questioned if this would be true. And unfortunately, I do think it would be. I think we hear so often of women taking back their abusers or being in relationships with people like this. And it's this chain of problems. And I couldn't imagine being in a situation like that. And even though I think this is a very hard piece to put in the novel, and I was losing respect for Gita, and I hate to say that because I don't want to lose respect for Gita because I was rooting for Gita, but in that moment you're just like, stop it. And I understand why Saloni left her, or not leave her, but just like, what do you do with somebody who just doesn't want to do it anymore? So really fascinating. I think that was so well done. And thankfully, Gita got out of her like mind fogness and realized that Ramesh is a terrible person, and it all worked out. And honestly, the way everything just kind of fell into place, where we have the Dom and we have Gita, and the end, like 50 pages, the last 50 pages were just superb. I love the last 50 pages of this novel because we're just sitting in a room. We're sitting in Gita's house, and we have Saloni tied up, we have Gita tied up, we have Farah tied up, we have the Dom sitting there being like, what in the world? We have Ramesh being a dill hole, and we have all this stuff happening. And you're just kind of like, what in the world? And Saloni's just constantly bringing up her dark humor, her sarcasm, her sarcasm is just fantastic in scenes like this. And I just thought this was so well done because instead of being like action, 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 we're playing with this we had this scene that's just been like layered in molasses, where it's going slowly and just gooey and sticky, and you're just wanting it to end, but then you're also like, give me more. And it's just so wonderful. And then the ending was wow. That last chapter where Ramesh is sitting and just I don't condone this situation. Like I said, this was really dark, where Gita is just bringing this alcohol to test on Ramesh, and Ramesh is just drinking it because he is an alcoholic, and he is just, that's all he wants. And that is so disgusting, but so powerful in the same way, because unfortunately there are people like that that's all they care about, that's all they live for. And you're proud of Gita because she got out of it, but you're also just like, what in the world? And it was just fascinating. Honestly, I can't go, if I wanted to talk about every single piece of this book, I would be sitting here for hours. I thought this was so well done. I think Parini did a great job of, like I said, building those blocks, making sure everything was connected, and then having this like masterpiece at the end. Not masterpiece, but close to a masterpiece. I think the relationships were really well done. I think we had purpose behind each character. I think the way this was created and put together was just really fascinating. I really enjoyed this read. I ate it up. I Definitely marks some scenes in here as well that I thought was really, really fascinating. Like this, we kind of get this same theme throughout the novel of where Gita's always wrong, and women are always wrong. Not just Gita, women. And Gita's done something at home and it's made Ramesh angry. And it's really fascinating also looking at this relationship. Sorry, I jumped away. But looking at the relationship with Gita and Ramesh is really fascinating because Gita sees Ramesh as like the best thing that's ever happened to her until things start going bad. And the unfortunate part about abusive relationships like this is that it's gradual and it continues to get worse and worse and worse and worse. But because it's gradual, the person who's being abused is just unfortunately not seeing that and constantly seeing it as their problem, especially if the person who's inflicting this is able to manipulate the person they're abusing. And so we have one scene where Ramesh has broken Gita's fingers, and this is so violent and so disgusting, and we question, how does Gita stay with somebody like this? But it's also, can Gita leave somebody? And Gita can't just leave somebody. In this culture, she's owes her life to this person in this situation. And so Gita's had her fingers broken, and Ramesh says, tell me, say you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Because they were just words, because it was easier than fighting, because she'd already lost so much that day, she said, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Oh, this was a different part. That's actually a different part. The first time he asked this, he's asked her to say this twice. So the first one was when Ramesh was trying to break up Saloni's and Gita's friendship, and Ramesh kept saying, Gita, Saloni's doing this to you on purpose. Saloni disrespects you. Saloni hates you. Saloni blah blah blah. So Ramesh is putting a pillar. Something, a wedge, putting a wedge between this relationship, and Gita sees the light, which really it's the light that Ramesh is shining on it, and that's when he says, tell me, say you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. And she says, because they were just words, because it was easier than fighting, because she's already lost so much that day, which is Saloni, she said, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. So this is where we start seeing that power dynamic happening, even though they're not even married yet. And then we see it again when, like I said, her fingers were broken. And the question becomes, there's this little passage at the end where it says, you don't have to, but forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, which is why I'm forgiving you for your little trick, whether or not you ask for it. Despite his words, a question, a request, a demand bloomed in the space between them. She felt certain about the words that fell, but as an automation, blank and mechanical, she was performing a memorized task, one born of survival, buried upon freedom, resurrected now. You're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Like, how amazing is that paragraph? And then we see it happen again, except for it's at the very end. It's this very end part, which I so love. And it says, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm definitely not sorry. And that moment where we have this theme, this isn't a theme that's been really pushed, but it's this idea that Gita's always wrong, Gita's always wrong. Ramesh is forcing this down Gita's throat. You're a terrible person. At the very end, we see this power moment of Gita just coming up. And it's like a breath of fresh air. And it was so well done. It was just, I really enjoyed that. And it was so great to see Gita come out of this abusive, terrible relationship and understand that Saloni's her friend and always was. That these women who, yes, caused many problems in her life are still the women that are there to support her. And this man who she thought loved her is just trash and garbage and not worth it. And men who treat women like that, or women who treat men like that, or people who treat people like that are trash and don't deserve that kind of respect and love from other people. And it's just, it was to have such a dark subject and have such a, it's such a, uncomfortable subject, but also bring in humor in this. It was mind-boggling that I was laughing in this book. But there were just moments in this novel where you're having Saloni talk to Gita, or the way that things are happening, and it just kind of falls together sometimes, and you're like, it's almost like embarrassment laughter at moments, but then also just like, you know, when you feel so stupid about yourself, you're like, it felt like that sometimes, really. Oh God. That's what I'm talking about. But there were also times where Saloni said something and it was just like, oh my gosh, ha! But I can't keep saying positive things about it. I've said enough. I just think this book was well written, beautiful debut novel, and I'm looking forward to seeing if Parini Shroff writes anything else, because I would definitely pick it up. I'm excited to see if anything else comes out, and I'm also, like I mentioned in my non-spoiler section, the Bandit Queen is a real person, and I'm super interested in watching a documentary about her and learning more about her, because the part that was in this book that talked about the Bandit Queen was really fascinating, but super, super heavy and dark and terrible. But it would be really interesting to kind of understand why Gita worshipped almost this person. Not worshipped, but like, it'd be interesting to see why Gita wanted to fashion her life or her morals behind this woman known as the Bandit Queen. So I highly recommend this. I've talked about it enough, and if you watched all of that and you still haven't read this, I still didn't give you all of the information that's in this book. Honestly, there's so much. I could not make a long enough video talking about this. But a really delightful read, and I'm really happy I read it, and definitely going to be keeping this on my bookshelf and reading it again. So that's it for this book. I've spoken enough. I wrote a couple notes, but I didn't actually talk too much about the notes. It was a lot about, is one thing I want to mention, and it's, so I did talk about how this is a satirical novel. It's going to be talking about some hard subjects, but understand that this is a satirical novel, and these subjects are not all like, hey, this is the reality of the world. It's, hey, this is an unfortunate little peek into a window that's there, and we need to understand when this is not the whole Indian culture in this novel, but there's just a little piece, and unfortunately a piece of every single culture out there, because this is not just happening there, it's happening everywhere. So that was one thing, and I'm going to stop pushing that idea. But there was another one that I thought was really interesting, and it's the idea behind women in the village banding together to overcome obstacles of patriarchy and gender, race, and discrimination. And I thought that's a great way to kind of look at this book. Is it's women coming together, even though the women were always great together. There was a little bit of blackmail, but I love the fact that you saw these women who were banding together to try to push for a better situation, and I really enjoyed it. I just did, and I highly recommend it, and I think you should read it, and you should talk to me about it, because I could talk about that book all day long. Yeah. So let's go ahead and figure out what our next book is going to be, and also what our next bake is going to be. I'm really excited. There are so many delicious bakes. I was flipping through this novel. I was flipping through Melissa Sforti's The Italian Baker baking book the other day, and there are so many tasty treats. So what are we baking? Whoop. That's what we're baking. Oh, it's called a parozzo. Parozzo. Parazzo. Parazzo is a dome-shaped dessert that dates back to the time when a famous Italian poet called Gabriele d'Annunzio wrote about the cake created to celebrate the shape and color of a bread made by farmers using corn flour. You can find it in the Italian region of Abruzzo, especially at Christmas, or better still, you can make your own. It is divine poetry. Oh, well, that sounds absolutely delightful, delicious, and wonderful. So this is the cake. And I just read that little text that was on the side of the recipe, which I think is always fun because that kind of gives you a little bit of a better idea of what you're going to be baking. Sometimes most of Forte mentions like personal anecdotes or personal stories, but that was just kind of a wonderful little view into the cake itself. And it looks like there's chocolate frosting on it, and I love a chocolate frosted cake. So that's going to be our bake for the month. In our book, I kind of want to choose this one, or, oh no, this one. So these are the two that are wrapped with different wrapping paper. It's because Michel ran out of the other wrapping paper he was using. And I think I want to choose one of these ones. The question is which one. They're both the same size, almost the same thickness. I think I'm going to go with this one. It's a little bit thinner. And I'm feeling a little bit of a thinner book this month. I have no idea. Ready? Oh. Oh. Thomas Hardy, Under the Greenwood Tree. Ooh. Probably the best loved and certainly the happiest of all Hardy novels. Under the Greenwood Tree formed the foundation of his career as a writer and inaugurated the great series of Wessex novels. The cover shows a detail from Ockhampton, Devon by Richard Hilder in the Massachusetts City Art Gallery. Ooh, this one's going to be interesting. I have no idea what this is going to be about. I don't know this one at all. Oh, there's some old English in here. It's also broken into parts, which is really interesting. So the fourth, autumn, and the last one I just saw was summer. Fascinating. Oh, and then you have like a whole section at the very front of the Hardy's works that he put together. It's a really old novel. I actually I don't even know where to go with this one. This is not a novel I would normally pick up. This is actually a novel from Michel, I believe. And I'm quite fascinating. I think it'll be an interesting read, and I think it'll be absolutely perfect for right now. It kind of goes into more detail at the very end of like the information on the back, because it's not necessarily a summary. It's just kind of like information about the novel, but it goes, this minor masterpiece derives from its being a vivid and authentic recreation of Hardy's own childhood environment. He modeled the villagers on people he had known intimately, and their talk, full of observation and humor, is a constant delight. So I think this is going to be a little piece of life, a little slice of life, and I think those are always really nice, especially since I've been reading a lot of those types of novels lately, and I've been really loving it. So I think this is absolutely perfect for right now and absolutely perfect for the coming month. So if you have read this, let me know. If you haven't read it and want to read it with me, let me know as well, because it'd be fun to do a little buddy reading. So we're going to be doing two very classic novel or classic things this month, which is really interesting. So we have a classic Thomas Hardy novel, Under the Greenwood Tree, like I mentioned, and then we have a classic old school cake from Italy. So what an interesting selection this month. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to talk to you next month about these two things. So don't forget, I post on the first of the month of last month's situation, or blind date with a book and blind date with a bake situation. So on May 1st, I'll be talking about these two, and I can't wait to see you guys there. So thanks again for joining me for this video, and thanks again for letting me rant for so long about The Bandit Queen, but I think it is an excellent novel that you should definitely pick up if you're into a novel. If you liked My Sister the Serial Killer, Ayonkan Braithwaite, I'm going to put the name here as well, in the picture of the book as well. But this, if you liked My Sister the Serial Killer, I think you would like The Bandit Queens as well. I think that would be a really interesting kind of matchup right there. But just as an idea, especially since I know this My Sister the Serial Killer, that novel got really big in the last couple of years, and I would love to see The Bandit Queens get a little bit more love too, and see it a little bit more around. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for letting me talk a bunch, and I can't wait to see you guys next month with another review video. But I'm also going to be posting a video in about 2 weeks where we'll be talking about some bakes, books, and other cozy content, and I would love to see you there. So if you guys like this video or want to see any other types of videos that have to do with books, baking, and other cozy content, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe and comment below, because it does help me a lot. It gives me a little bit of perspective of what you guys are liking, and also I just love to hear from you, and it's always nice to chat. So until next time, you guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, a lovely weekend, and I'll see you guys soon. Ciao!